And unfortunately, Coach is not able to be with us tonight. He's got another commitment. So I guess tonight is going to be called Doctor's Corner. I do want you to know, though, however, that Coach and I had a conversation about this topic. And tonight we're going to be talking about learning gaps. And he wanted me to be sure to tell you that a learning gap can be in sports just as much as it can be in academics. I think we tend to think of a learning gap in academics, but if you're trying to learn a sport and you're trying to learn and develop a skill, you could have a gap as well. Maybe you don't know how to hold his example was maybe you don't know how to hold the basketball in such a way. You don't know how to tuck your elbow in. You don't know how to follow it through. And so I think that that's just a good reminder for us that a learning gap can be in anything. It's not just an academic gap. Maybe you have a learning gap when it comes to cooking or to fixing a car. I know I would. I look at it and I think, I'm glad I have AAA, right? So we're going to talk about learning gaps. The other thing I want to say before we get too started is this. I was telling Robert just before I got online, I came in about 5 minutes ago and I had no internet access. And I have no idea why or how that happened, but we've been experiencing these gaps in service. And I even I have Spectrum, and I saw Spectrum out and about on our street today. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but should we just blink out altogether? Please know that we're not hanging up on you. What's happening is that we're having an internet glitch. So again, welcome, glad you're here. In Bakersfield today, the weather was beautiful, only 90 degrees, and that's wonderful after coming off of 103, 105. So I had a refreshing day, and I'm looking forward to really talking about learning gaps. So Robert, you want to say hi to this group and then get started?
Yes, welcome guys. And today it's just me and Cindy, like she mentioned. And yeah, she does look a little bit static, but hopefully like it goes away around along the run. But we're ready.
All right. So do we have a question? Common causes. I think that there are common causes for youth, but I think there are common causes for us all. I was thinking the other day when I was looking at this for the first time, really this topic, they say that you never forget how to ride a bike. Ride it with the same confidence that I rode it with as a kid would not be there for sure. I would be pretty sure I was going to fall. And so I'd be, really antsy about that. So one of the things that can cause learning gaps is that you don't do something for a while. And depending on how far along you are in making something a habit. So if you're really good at something and you've practiced it and practiced it and practiced it, and then you lay off from it for a few years, you won't have the same edge, but you can pick it back up. But if you haven't done something for 20 or 30 years, right? And I know that that's not really for a kid, but for a kid, 20 or 30 years, that's how long summer feels like for them. So summer learning loss happens when kids don't do anything to keep a skill in place. So they may have had a skill at the end of the year, then they hang out and, watch TV, sleep late, fiddle around, don't really do much. And so they can have a definite learning loss there. But I think it would also play out with sports. If you've been a great player, you're going to lose some of your edge. If you can certainly create a learning gap. You've just stopped using that skill, that muscle. Another thing I think that can be a barrier is socioeconomics. And they've done lots and lots of studies around this as far as academic concerns. And what they know is that if a child, from the time so let's say they finish kindergarten, and then they have a very non-productive summer. They're not reading, nobody's stimulating them. They're just kind of hanging out. Then when they come back at the beginning of the year, they will have lost something. They will have lost their edge, and it'll take about 9 weeks for them to get it back. Well, if that happens, these studies have proven, if this happens over, let's say, until the child is in 5th grade, they'll be at least a year to 2 years behind because they haven't kept abreast. And so you fall back, but you never quite catch up again. And then you fall back again. And then the next time you don't go as far forward as you have before. So if you're in a situation where your parents are working 2, 3, 4 jobs, to try and keep your house over your head and to keep food on the table, and they're not able to do some stimulating things with you. Maybe there's no expanded learning program that's running near you, so you can't go. Then that can certainly create a gap as well. So that's also possible. And then I think that a lot of times with kids, what we do, which I think is a big mistake, is instead of figuring out where they are, we think about where we think they ought to be. And so I'm going to help you be where I think you ought to be, rather than truly going back and seeing where you are and what did you miss, and can we correct that. And so I think that all three of those things, the lack of practice, the space between when you've done something, even if you know it really well, and when you actually start doing it again, I think there's a lag there. It can be a gap. And then I think it can also happen when you just stop and you're not quite, you haven't quite refined a skill yet, but you stop. I think that holds you back. And then I think that if you're in a situation where somebody's not able to support and push you, because I know with my grandkids, they'd be just as happy to sit and watch TV in the summer because it's hot and they're done with school for a while. Now, we don't allow them to do that, but that's what their preference would be. So I think that learning gaps happen. And they happen because we don't really have an opportunity to do what Malcolm Gladwell calls 10,000 hours of practice. And so if we could do more of that, we'd be able to cut down on those gaps. But we have to take kids where they are, not where we want them to be. So if they've lost over the summer, then take them where they are, celebrate where they are, celebrate what they've remembered, rather than focusing on what they've forgotten. So as well. So I know I used to be a pretty mean ping pong player, and I probably haven't played in 40 years. And I'm pretty sure I'm not so hot anymore. All right. So Robert, is there something else?
Yes, our next question is, how can I identify learning gaps early?
I think the most effective way to tell if there is a learning gap is to truly be observant. A lot of times, I think as adults, one of the downsides, I think, of being an adult is that we've learned how to excuse things away. We go, oh, well, they're just having a bad day. Or I just didn't ask the question right. And so I think we need to be really observant to it continues to move forward and you have this giant hole in your learning. It's going to cause you a lot of discomfort later on. So I just want to talk about the skill of division. When you divide, absolutely, you have to know multiplication. You have to know how many times, this would fit into this total product. But you also have to be able to do subtraction. And so if I have a learning gap about my ability to subtract, and I can only subtract successfully when the numbers on top are larger than the subtrahend, right? Which are the numbers on the bottom. I don't know how to borrow. I don't know how to go and change hundreds into tens and tens into ones. I've forgotten that. When I get to division, you're not going to know if my challenge is that I don't know my multiplication tables or I don't know how to subtract. And so that's why it's important for us to be really, really observant, because you're guessing what they're missing instead of knowing what they're missing. So if I were to be in a sport, is the problem that I can't throw the football? Or is it that I lost that key part about where I needed to put my fingers as far as the bindings on the ball are concerned and how I need to follow through? So I may have lost in a skill set like that, but if you don't uncover where my weakness is, where my struggle is, then you're probably not going to be able to rectify any sort of skill development loss very quickly. So I think being observant really matters. And then I think you need to clarify, because you may be reading a response one way and the child may be meaning it in a completely different way. And I may have shared this story before because it's one of my favorites. But when I was a principal, I was out on the grounds during the intermediate grades, fourth, fifth, and sixth recess. And I noticed a young man in fourth grade sitting over underneath the tree reading a book. And my brain said, he likes to read. So I went over and I said to him, oh, I see that you like to read. And he said, no, I hate reading. And I thought, this is really odd. Maybe he's being punished and he's having to read. So I said, oh, well, tell me about your book. And he got all excited about this book, telling me about it. And it was so exciting, he could hardly put it down. And he was wondering if this was going to happen and that. And he was just very excited about it. I said, okay, I'm confused. You say that you don't like reading, but here you are during your recess reading. And he said, oh. So I could have gone away and interpreted and made meaning out of what I saw by saying he hated reading. That's what he told me. And he was being forced to sit there and read a book. And I would have been 100% wrong because I didn't check out with him how he was seeing things. So sometimes we can have a misconception and we can think we're right and we're not. We have a misconception about learning. So I think that that's also a way that you can pick up a gap, because what they've done is they've hopped over a key piece of information. I've hopped over what that means to run forward and then turn around to catch the ball. I didn't get that part. So I just keep running forward, right? So I think that it's really important that we're observant, but we also ask questions and talk to them. And when you ask them questions, don't try and get them to answer your way. Ask them. So talk to me about how you see this. Talk to me about what you see your role as. Talk to me about where you see the gap for yourself. And a lot of times kids can tell us that. So I think that that's Adopt. And if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to do so. You can find it online, in fact, and they'll read it to you. But in the Dot, this little girl is in art class. Her name is Vashti. And she says, I don't draw. I don't know how to do this. I can't do anything. I don't know how to do it. So her teacher comes by and she sees this blank paper and she says to Vashti, oh, it's a polar bear in a snowstorm. And Vashti, no, that's not what it is. And so the teacher asks her if she can do something. And so Vashti makes a dot on the paper. And the teacher asks her to sign it, which means that the teacher values her dot. And she actually posts it in her room. Well, I won't tell you how the story ends, but other than to say, Vashti becomes a dot maker. And so sometimes kids sell short. They think they're unable to do something. And so consequently, they just don't even try. And so if you're seeing that happening, you'll also want to encourage them. And remember, when you ask somebody to sign something, sign your homework paper for me, sign your art project for me, sign your science work for me. You're telling them that you're giving them ownership of that. And I think that's really helpful. Okay, I think that's probably enough of an answer for that. What's the next question?
Definitely, that was a good answer. Next question is, what strategies help bridge academic gaps?
Okay, so I'll tell you that I think you have to start by observing. But I also think you start by playing king or queen of the world. And when you're doing that, what you're asking yourself in this particular instance is, what is every single step that needs to be made? What is it? What's the whole process? You're going to do metacognition, which is thinking about your own thinking. And you're going to really take yourself back and say, hey, if I wanted to do blah, whatever that is, if you wanted to do that, what is it step by step that you would need? When you're observing, you can tell which step the child is struggling with, or which step they just stop because they can't go further. So I think it's really important that you know what all the steps are, so that you can share with them and work with them. So whether that's in science or music or art, like the dot, or in sports, or in learning how to read, there are certain things, there's a progression, right? You learn things and you stack it on top. It's kind of like, playing cap the bat, where you just keep going up and adding layers and layers of skills. And if you're not sure what those skills are, you'll never be able to help them, because unless you just get lucky. And luck is really not a strategy. So you want to be able to identify all the steps for yourself, so that you can figure out which step is causing them issues. And one of the things I like to ask kids is, tell me what you know how to do. When they ask me, what do I do with this reading? Well, I'm sure they know something. So I say to them, tell me what you do know how to do. And then they're able to tell me that. And then I say, well, then tell me where you're confused. Because I can try and guess where they're confused, but if I can get them to hone in on where they're confused, it will be just much more successful. And I think too that it's helpful if you don't have kids just demonstrate what they know all in the same way. So for instance, if I'm asking you a question and it requires paper and pencil, and that's the only way I ask you to show me what you know, then I'm going to be limiting you to my preconceived idea of what the answer should look like. So give kids opportunities to work through things, to do it with manipulatives, to actually physically see how something is working. And I think that that's true in math for sure, but I also think it's true in reading and science and all of those things. One of kind of the disguise skills that kids have is about inferencing. Right? And we all inference. We do it, I don't know, hundreds of times a day, right? We assume we know stuff based on a circumstance that we've witnessed. And so what we want is to give kids the opportunity to take a step back and really examine their own process, so that they can find out where the hiccups are. So I think that I think that's what I would say, is to truly take a step back and ask yourself, okay, these are the steps I know need to happen, and which ones do I see this child struggling with? I guess I do want to say one more thing. Productive struggle is okay. A lot of times we think, oh, we don't ever want them to feel bad or to not be able to do something. We don't want them to struggle. Productive struggle is good. Productive struggle happens when you're guiding the process and helping them through the process so that they can move forward. Unproductive struggle is when you leave the kid over in the corner and you say, good luck to you. So if they're doing productive struggle, even if they have to come back the next day and pick it up, I still think that's to your advantage if you're trying to identify and use a strategy to help them overcome a gap in their learning. So I'm going to pitch it back to you, Robert.
All right, our next question is, how can I use assessments to address learning gaps?
Okay, so first of all, I want to say that an assessment is not grading. It's also not evaluating. So we talk about assessment, and I much prefer talking about what in academic language is called formative assessment. Summative assessment means that the project's over and you're just talking about what you did. But formative assessment is when you're looking for what's causing the issue, what's causing the disconnect, and recognizing what that disconnect is. And sometimes you'll be surprised what the disconnect is. So I do want to share this. This is something I actually experienced. There were 3 children in the same family. There was a boy, and then a girl, and then a boy. And all of them were stellar students. I mean, just outstanding. And when the girl reached 4th grade, her academic skills started to just go back. I mean, she wasn't able to compete or really work through 4th grade. So she was in tears, right? She said, I don't know why I can't get this. I don't know why I can't learn this. I don't know, teacher and coach. And so she started working with her. And what they realized is that this little girl was so smart that what she'd been able to do through 3rd grade was memorize immediately any word that she saw. And then so every word became a sight word. She did not have, not one word attack skill. She didn't know how to sound words out. She didn't know what the sounds were that the letters made. She didn't know any of that because she was so smart. She just immediately saw the word and remembered it forever. And so what was happening when she hit 4th grade is because of all of the content. So until 4th grade, you're pretty much doing reading and math. But after that, you start doing a lot more science, a lot more social studies, a lot more that you're doing reading in content areas. And the words were coming at her so fast that even as smart as she was, she couldn't remember them all. And so what we saw was her reading skills decline. And so when we realized that that was the challenge, we talked with her, we talked with mom and dad about it. And so she could obviously continued in 4th grade, but we did some remedial work with her back at these very basic levels of reading comprehension, the ability to sound out a word she had needed to use. So just know that sometimes a gap will come up when you least expect it. And it's like, whoa, what's happening here? So you have to stay on top of that. And you need to do that. And assessment is when you start to dig deeper and diagnostically, have them go through each step with you. Ask all of the questions. Don't leave any of them out. And then you are making a formative assessment about where that child is and what's causing the issue. So I think that that's an important way to look at it. I will also tell you that if have Lexia, maybe they have iReady, maybe they could have any number of them. A lot of times, those programs will identify gaps in children's learning. So you're not going to be testing them in that way because we're going to support academic learning in disguised ways, through games, through activities, through all of that kind of stuff. But you could talk to the classroom teacher and ask if there were any gaps identified for that student in the ongoing reading and assessment or math assessment strategies that they use. A lot of schools check on kids every, 2 to 3 weeks. So I would certainly go in and ask about that. I wouldn't ignore that as a possibility. And then I guess I would say, one of the things I like to do with kids is to play some sort of a game. So this afternoon I was playing Clue with my 2 grandchildren, the 7-year-old and the 9-year-old. And the 9-year-old pretty much has it figured out. The 7-year-old struggles with the notion of Clue and how to play it. But he's much better than he was at the beginning of the summer when he hadn't played at all. But there's gaps in his ability to play that game. And part of it is his age. He's just 7. And part of it is that we haven't taught him certain skills. And part of it is that he doesn't play often enough. And so I would just tell you that whether it's in how to play the game of Clue, or it's how to read, or it's how to do a math problem, or it's to understand history, social studies, or science, or music, it doesn't matter what the topic is. There's a hole in what they know that they may be unaware of if they're not able to execute, and go straight through with practice. Okay, Robert, tell me who we have here tonight.
Right now we have like a total of, let me see, 15 people. That's based off of
All right.
YouTube and Twitch and Instagram and TikTok.
All right. Well, welcome to all of you. And but I'm glad that you're here. And if you've been here before, you already know that. So we're happy that you're here and welcome. So
Yes.
Robert, let's try another one.
All right, and just want to add on that we are experiencing some Wi-Fi difficulties. So, like Cindy's camera is going very slow and static. So, do hang in there with us. But our next
Yep.
question, yeah, our next question is, what role does individualized instruction play in closing gaps?
Okay. So unless an entire class of students didn't get taught a particular skill, then what you are addressing is individuals, right? You're looking at each kid individually. There is a new protocol for tutoring that's out. It's called HIT, and HIT stands for High Impact Tutoring. And the research is showing that this strategy is really very, very helpful for kids. And you don't have to do it. Impact tutoring works. And all of you are capable of doing this because it begins with a relationship. It begins with you caring about those kids. Because if I'm a kid who's struggling, I already have enough self-doubt. My self-talk is probably not very good. Oh, I can't believe I have to go into reading. I don't know how to do this. I'm so stupid. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Everybody else is able to do it. I'm not, right? They're going through all of that. And so when you build a relationship with them, you're saying, you're okay just like you are. You're absolutely okay. I like you just how you are. You are enough for me. Now, I'm also here to help and support you as you want to learn more. And so that's the first premise of this high impact tutoring, is that you build this relationship. That means you don't need to be absent very often, right? Because when you're absent from an expanded learning program, what a kid sees that as they're not worth your time. And I know that sometimes we're sick and we can't help it, and I understand that. But there are days when you think, it's Friday, I could just take off early, right, for the weekend. Or, oh, I'm tired, I'll just take Monday off. That's really hard on kids. They've been disappointed, many of them, many, 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 many times by adults not showing up for them. And so when you're building this relationship, you are taking care to demonstrate every day how happy you are that child is in your life, that they're breathing your air, and that you have the privilege of working with them, and that they are enough. So that's the first part of this HIT tutoring, building that relationship. And every one of you can do that. Every one of you can take an interest in every single kid that you have. The second part is something I've already mentioned, which is to take the child at the holes where they have the holes in their learning, not where you want them to be. So if I'm working with a fifth grader, and I think in my mind that you should have the skill set to do percentages and decimals, because after all, they started touching on that in fourth grade, and half of fifth grade is done, and you've been exposed to that. You've been taught that. If I want you to be there, but somewhere you're not even understanding place value, and I never address that with you, then I'm going to compound and frustrate you all the more because you're just trying to memorize an answer rather than understand the process. And so I have to look at you and I have to say, okay, what's really causing this hiccup, right? So you're going to be like the mechanic who's going to figure out where you're going to make your adjustment. And once you've done that, you'll be able to help that child because you've built this relationship with them that's so important. And you're helping them identify the gap and helping them to understand what they know, what they don't know, what's causing the gap, and helping them to fill it. So I think that if you do that, you'll be able to help them close the gap. I don't believe that any adult has ever closed a gap for a kid. Kids close the gaps for themselves because they're supported by an adult. But you can't will a gap to be closed. If there's a gap in a kid's learning, what you can do is be infinitely patient. You can use every strategy you can come up with. You can meet them where they are. You can build this relationship. But ultimately, if the gap is to be filled, if the gap is to be crossed, it is them. You supporting, you coaching, you believing in them, and them believing in themselves and finally being able to put that to rest. Okay, Robert, you're up.
All right, our next question is, how can I involve families in addressing learning gaps?
You know, it's interesting that you're talking about families right now. I was just doing some research about ways to bring families in, to support families. And I'm not going to tell you that this is 100% of the people because I don't know that. And older siblings want what's very best for the child, for children. I don't think that they set out to make their life miserable. That may happen, but I don't think that's their intent. I think they care. And sometimes they just don't know what they ought to do to demonstrate that they care. And so one of the things, I think there's twofold answer here. One of the things you can do is to engage the parent in actually coming down and sitting with the child and watching the child work through things. And maybe it's when the child has started to resolve the challenge or the gap that they have, and then how to ask the parent if the parent can help. And if the parent can't help them to fill the gap per se, then talk to the parent about how important it is to ask the child about their progress. How I know you had a gap with long division. Where are you now? Are you better off now? Do you know more than you did before? Right? Is there anything that you could do at home that would help you practice? So a parent can do that. So I think that you need to engage the parent in actually working with the student so they can see where that gap is. And in expanding learning, we've kind of taken over that responsibility for parents because we are the ones who sit through homework. And a lot of times, to me, one of the advantages of homework is that I think it's a daily or weekly communication with the family about what the child is to be learning. But if you're the parent and you don't ever have to go over that, if you're not helping them and then you don't take it upon yourself to review the child's homework, then you don't really know where they're at. So I think that you want to engage them in that opportunity. And I think that you want to give them a few strategies about asking questions, asking the child what they know, what they understand, what they don't understand, how they're seeing that fuzzy gray area that they're not sure of. So I think you do that. The second thing that I think that you do, adults in this world who did not have a great school experience. They were the kid who said, I hate reading. Right? Because what they loved to do was being corrupted in some way in the classroom. So I think that you have to acknowledge that. And I think you have to acknowledge the fact that they're working hard to do their very best. And your job is to help them find more ways to do that. So I think that you have to appreciate the fact that that parents may not want to sit down and help the child with homework. Okay, great. The next step would be, will you ask the child about homework, what they did for homework, or what they did in class, and have them show you an example? And some people say, well, you can't do that because the parent doesn't speak the same language. Great. Have the kid explain it in the language the parent does understand. They're fine with that. If the child's explaining it in their first language, they will understand it. So I think that we want to do that. And I think the other thing is that we need to showcase kids in the best possible light. So if your kid is struggling, you can have ego in that, right? Because somehow your kid should have been perfect and they're not. And so you can have some ego about that. And you may want to blame this person or that person or the kid themselves. So I think it's important that we showcase kids and let them demonstrate how really wonderful they are, whether that's a science fair, an art show, a musical production. It's pretty cool. This is just a snag in the road. It doesn't define who they are. It doesn't. A gap in learning doesn't define who you are unless the grown-ups in your life can't help you go back and pick it up. And then you can still define it for yourself as you move forward, as we help you build agency. So a gap is not who you are, it's what's occurring. And we want to give parents a chance to realize that their kids are really pretty special so that they can go, wow, my kid did that. And then it's less challenging to accept the areas in which they're not stellar. So that's how I'd answer that question, Robert.
Awesome. Our next question is, what activities reinforce foundational skills?
So we're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is lesson design. So I want to talk about this for just a minute. So let's say that you're struggling with reading, and I want to support you in reading. Okay, that's great. I can drill and kill you. I can have you read the same passage over and over till you get it right. I can have you do speed reading. I can have you do all kinds of things. Or I can have you participate in a drama, a play where you had to read your lines. Or I could have you be in a reader's theater where you're not acting, you're just reading. And you get to read with a group, and so that you can follow that. I don't have to do that in a way that makes you think, oh, not again, not more reading, not more math, because I can make it fun. If you're struggling with addition, I can make a grocery store or some sort of store with a variety of things in it. And so you're going to be working on adding, because you have to figure out what your total bill is. So I think that when we're looking at activities, they should be fun, they should be engaging, they should not look like typical school. Don't do more of that. If school worked for the kid, they wouldn't have a gap. They don't learn in the traditional way for whatever the reason. Their brain is wired differently. It's the same reason that no matter how hard I try, I could never tell you how many things would fit into the back end of a truck. Good luck to you. I just keep piling until they fall out. I'm not good at that. And you can work with me, and I think I'm better now than I used to, but I'm loud. Nowadays you can get your phone to read out loud to you, right? So you can teach them ways to reinforce. I think you want to reinforce those skills in fun and engaging ways. I think you want to reinforce the skill of fractions by cooking, by mixing bubble solutions, by doing things like that so that you're actually practicing. And I would take a recipe, and if the recipe said 1 cup of this and 2 cups of this and 1/3 of a teaspoon and 2 tablespoons or whatever, I would take that recipe and I would break it down so that they were measuring a bunch of different things. And then I would ask them, well, so it asked for 3 half cups. So how much would that be? Well, that's a cup and a half, right? So that they would be able to experience that in the real world. And they're having a great time doing it. They're getting to work with their friends and they get to eat whatever's left at the end of it. How can you lose with that? And so what you're doing is reinforcing those skills in real world scenarios. I don't know about you, and I know my education in high school was at least 10,000 years ago, but I can remember taking algebra. And I could get the answers. That wasn't the problem. But I asked myself every day I did an algebra problem or an algebra homework assignment, why the heck am I doing this? How will I ever use this? Because nobody ever bothered to explain how it helps you think about things differently. They just said, do problems 1 through 50 odd. Okay. So I never appreciated algebra. And I don't know that I would use it now to speak of, but I didn't appreciate, there wasn't a learning objective for me. So I think you've got to begin with the end in mind when you talk about lesson design. Have utilized, if you've got kids in 4th, 5th, and higher, you've utilized the United Nations program for vocabulary development that's called Free Rice. And if you haven't used Free Rice and you have kids that are 4th grade and higher, please check it out. It's a United Nations program. And what happens is that it works to educate the child who's doing the program. And then the child gives back, because Free Rice means that for every word you can identify a synonym for, you are putting grains of rice and vegetables in a bowl that will go to feed a hungry child in the world. And so I'm learning for me, but I am also serving others and I'm giving back. So anytime you can do something like that, and again, Free Rice is a great program to do that with, and help it be in the real world, really measuring something, really trying that out, making change. The other day, I made a purchase, and it was $9.60. So that meant my change was 40 cents. And I got back 4 dimes. And I thought, this young person doesn't understand that it would have been better to give me a quarter, a dime, and a nickel rather than 4. You're doing something with kids where they have to use a cash register. Go down to their favorite drive-in or go online and download it and give them a menu and have them figure out, hey, you've only got $10. What can you buy? That's practical. That's real world. And yet they're using all those skills that you would like for them to use. So I just think that making it real, making it relevant, putting it in their world is really, really important. Because otherwise they'll be like me with algebra. Why the heck am I doing this? Yeah, I don't understand how I'm going to use this in my life. And I think that kids need to know that, especially if it's something that they're not red hot at. And then you can also teach them workarounds. So that's what I would say.
Perfect.
It's to you. Yep.
All right. Our next question is, how can I integrate technology to support learning recovery?
You know, I'm going to do this with that question. So there are a zillion and 12 technology programs that you can utilize. If you have children, probably maybe 3rd grade and up, that are struggling with math and also with some other things, but with math in particular, there are all kinds of websites that you can go to that will give them free help in how to figure out problems. And so you want to give them that opportunity. There are also programs that will help them develop their reading skills, such as Lexia or iReady. Any of those will work. And if your school has a program, you can have them do that. And I think that technology is good. I think it reinforces but I don't think it should be the only teacher. And I think a lot of times we capitulate and we say, well, the computer, some kids, just like I think sitting down in a reading circle works for some kids. I think that some kids learn how to read zippy quick and others struggle and struggle and struggle. I just think that's the difference in how brains are wired and how easy that is, how much they've been read to, all of those things come into play. So if you're going to use technology, use it as a reinforcement, but don't do it to the point that you take away from people to people interactions. One of the things I know with my grandson, my youngest one, who's in second grade, he has learned how to read quite well because he wants to play Minecraft. So that's a technology, and it's teaching him how to read because he wants to play it so desperately that he will learn to read whatever it takes, right? And he'll ask his older sister, what's this word? Or he'll ask me, he's not letting any of it slide. And then he's hanging on to it. So, have him do a lot of an activity, but have him do it in a variety of ways. But use technology, but don't make it your sole source because it isn't. It really needs to be one of many mediums that they use. And then check out with the school day what they're using and piggyback for 10 minutes every day on what they're already doing, which will be helpful for the teacher as well. Okay, Robert, you're up. I think we got about 10 minutes.
Yes. Our next question is, what role does motivation play in overcoming learning gaps?
Well, I would say to you this. Have you ever heard of the story of the little engine, right? The little engine who wanted to get over the mountain. And everybody, the big engines are laughing at it, and the little engine is going to make it. And the little engine says, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And when it gets to the top of the hill and gets ready to go down, I know I could, I know I could, I know I could, or I knew I could, right? So I think motivation matters. And part of that motivation for the little engine is what we call intrinsic motivation. The engine wanted it itself. And we need kids to want is pretty tiny. So what we do is then support the development of intrinsic motivation with extrinsic motivation. But be careful that you're not giving them an M&M for every little single thing they do. You don't want them to become Pavlov's dog who says, I will do this task as long as you feed me, right? You don't want that, but you do want to build their extrinsic motivation or their intrinsic motivation. And you can do that by setting goals. So if you're able to do this, then you will get this reward so that it's not a one-on-one reward. But what you're doing, don't lose sight of, you're not trying to bribe them into every action. What you're trying to do is help them build that intrinsic motivation that allows them to believe in themselves and to have confidence in themselves and to say, I think I can do this. If I work at this, I can master it. I am capable. I am possible. And so you're going to want to do help them with some self-talk, especially if what you see them doing is just withdrawing, giving up, putting their pencil down, shaking their head, breaking their pencil, doing whatever they can to avoid the task. But ultimately, you're trying to develop that depth of intrinsic motivation. So for those of you, if you're here tonight because you're here all on your own, that's intrinsic motivation. If somebody's paying you to be here, that's extrinsic motivation. Now, let me make something else perfectly clear. I am pretty sure that if I'm not getting paid, I'm not continuing to work. I'll go find something else where I can get paid. So we all have extrinsic motivation. It's not that you're going to do away with that, but it has to be coupled with that desire to be successful. So I think it plays a big role. Who've tried hard, have been able to overcome problems and challenges in their life. In Bakersfield, we have a current local advertisement where a young father talks about the fact that he dropped out of school in high school. And then he decided that for his son, he wanted to go back and how good it felt to be able to get his GED. So it's never over. You can always develop that intrinsic motivation to help you move forward and learn something that you struggled with. But I do think that motivation is key. I can promise you that in the summer, I am not motivated in the least to go and work in my yard. It's too hot. It's the bugs, the mosquitoes are out there. I'm not motivated to do that. And I will only go out almost under duress. And I think that's how kids can feel about subjects in reading and math or social studies, science, that they're not comfortable with. It would be like me having to go out in the summer and do that in the heat of the day. I will go out in the morning early, but I am not going out at 2 in the afternoon. I'm just not doing it. So I think kids can feel that way about academics as well. Okay, I think we have time for one more.
All right, the last question is, how can I create a safe environment for youth struggling academically?
Um, you know, you as the adult, I'll give you an example. If I am not willing to play a game or sit down and talk with a child who's struggling and praise them and call out to the rest of the class how proud I am of so and so for mastering this skill, even though maybe the rest of the class has mastered it. If I'm not demonstrating that I value that child just as much, learning gap and all, then how can I expect kids to value them? And then so I have to demonstrate that. The other thing I need to do is this. Just because you have a learning gap in reading doesn't mean that you're not a great athlete. It doesn't mean that you're not a great artist. It doesn't mean that you're not great at putting together a science fair project. It doesn't mean that you're not a great actor. It doesn't mean any of that. It means that you're struggling in this one area. So I want to be sure that I highlight you in the areas where you're strong so that others can see you as a person that has strength and has value and can add to the party, even though you have this academic challenge. And I think that that's really important. And you can't just say it. You have to demonstrate it. You have to, 8-year-old granddaughter is what I call an easy teach. She is not difficult to teach at all. You tell her once and she's got it and she's on her way. She's a great reader. And she was asked by her teacher to tutor a child who was struggling in reading. And she came to my house after school and we were talking about it. And she said to me, I don't understand why they have such trouble with reading. Well, of course she doesn't understand it. She doesn't have trouble with reading. However, she does have trouble remembering what the notes are on the piano, right? And I said to her, well, you struggle with the notes on the piano, right? Knowing which is, she said, yeah. She said, I just don't get it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, it feels that you're helping with reading. They feel about it the exact same way as you feel about the piano. And when I say to you, it's time to practice, you go, ah, right? That's exactly how they feel. So your job is to try and make it easier for them, to try and understand where they're missing, not to make them feel bad because they can't read. You need to say to them, okay, let's take a look, because you know what? I know that you can learn this. If I can figure out how to help you, I know that you can learn this because I know you're capable of doing it. So I think that we have to send that message often to kids who are struggling. I believe in you. I believe in the possibility of you. It may never be your strongest thing, and that's okay. But you will be able to achieve to your desired level. So I think that brings us to the end. Is that right, Robert?
Yes. Yeah, 2 more minutes.
To thank all of
One more
you who are
minute.
all of you who showed up tonight. I appreciate it. I know that you missed the coach because he always has funny stories to tell. And so, that's unfortunate, but I hope that I was able to answer these questions. And if you would like more information about this topic of learning gaps, if that's partly in the purview of your work, please don't hesitate to put your email address or send us an email at admin, ADMIN, at consult, FOUR, kids.com. And we'll be happy to send you some information. Or you can, like I said, you can put it in the chat, or you can just email us at admin@consult, FOURkids.com. And we will be happy to share with you some of the strategies that I've talked about and others as well that can help you help kids